We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey guys, we're back, and today we're talking to Brad from Debt-Free Dad, and I think you're going to love this conversation. We're kind of focusing on that consumer side of decluttering your home. So if you struggle with shopping or overspending, and that's bringing clutter into your house, you're going to love today's episode. Before we dive in, I just want to thank you all for being here. As I mentioned a little while back, there's been a huge influx of listeners and followers over on Instagram. Paring_down is the handle if you're not following there, but it just means so much to me. I know that you're not here just to support me. I know you're here hopefully to learn and grow and better your life, but it does also help me out because this is what I love to do. This is leaning into my purpose and is becoming a full-time career for me. And I just love it so much. And it means a lot that this is resonating with you. If it does resonate with you, if you're coming back every week, it would mean the world if you could go leave a review here on the podcast, whether you listen in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or on YouTube. If you could just go leave a 5-star review, that really helps the podcast spread on the back end of things. You can even leave a sentence if you want bonus points, just saying, I really like listening to it, or this has helped me declutter my house. And just anything super simple. If you write a little sentence, it's extra helpful. But even if you don't have time to do that, just go click the little 5 stars, and that is amazing. And I would appreciate it so much. But ultimately, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. So let me tell you a little bit about Brad before we dive in. So Brad has dedicated his life to serving and helping people with their personal finances. He provides an eye-opening outlook on debt and money that really challenges today's popular thinking through his speaking gigs, the Debt-Free Dad podcast, social media, and his online membership site, Roots of Personal Finance, which has helped people save and pay off tens of millions of dollars. Brad is successful because he really teaches a simple process to help people develop a healthier financial mindset. They learn how to save money and eliminate debt, which allows them to take control of their finances so they can do more of what they love. And that's why he's on the podcast today, because you guys know I am all about intention. I'm all about decluttering your life. Yes, your home, also your schedule, also what you're spending your money on. We're really paring it all down so you can make room for what actually matters to you. This is not less for the sake of less. This is less for the sake of more, but only the more that matters. And so Brad is here to talk to us today about the money side of decluttering. And I hope that this conversation helps you identify and remember what is most important to you and where you actually want to spend your money, as well as ways to maybe earn a little bit of money through the decluttering process. So let's welcome Brad Nelson to the podcast. All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much for being here. You know, this is a conversation I wanted to have for a long time. Is kind of like, how does money and decluttering go hand in hand? So it's nice to have someone who knows what they're talking about on. And again, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's kick things off by you kind of introducing yourself. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so we started a company called Debt-Free Dad. It's going on about pretty close to 9 years ago. We originally started out with the idea of doing financial coaching and helping people more on an individual basis. And eventually, I transformed that into more of a community and bringing in people on more of a large format or group format and helping people with the education of personal finance and creating better financial mindsets and really teaching people how to save better and get out of debt. And really, at the end of the day, is just to end financial stress in their life and try to reduce as much of that as we possibly can. And the reason I got into this is because I struggled with a lot of the same types of things that many other people struggle with over the years, living paycheck to paycheck, credit card debt, high car payments, and pretty much just bought into this advertised American life that's out there of, you know, consuming and just being loaded down by bills. And I sadly lost my very first house to foreclosure because my first marriage ended. And a big reason why that marriage ended was what was money related. It played a really significant role. So I saw firsthand how, problematic money and personal finance can be in a relationship. But, that when that relationship ended, I lost that house. And that was kind of a wake up call to me of how, or the house of cards I kind of built in my life. I had a 2-year-old son, Noah, at the time. And it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I got to do this stuff differently because nothing's getting better, right? I was making decent money, and it was just poor money management. So I just started to learn how money works, and I really went out and tried to learn from other people and other individuals that were just doing this stuff. And I just started practicing what they were doing, and I eventually got my way out of debt after about 4 or 5 years. And along the way, people just started asking me for help as I was sharing my story, and just kind of sharing like, hey, how life changing this is. I have less stress. I actually have money in the bank. Life is pretty good now. And so people started kind of coming to me, friends, family, people I didn't even know were struggling, and were saying, hey, I'm kind of struggling with a lot of the same things that you were, Brad. Can you help me? And so I kind of accidentally fell into this, and I fell in love with not really the money side so much, but it's really helping people transform their life. Because when you have control over your money, it really has this huge ripple effect on the rest of your life, your relationships, your career, your parenting. I mean, just how you show up every day. And it's been just an amazing honor just to be able to help people and normal everyday families. And I want to be clear about that. I think that's what sets our company apart, is that we're not one of these big financial gurus out there that's got over 1,000 employees and, $500 million business. We're just normal everyday people who drive normal cars, live in normal houses. And we struggle with a lot of the same types of family struggles that are out there. And we're just kind of showing people how we've done it and how we've remained debt free, even in today's economic times when expenses are as high as they are and things are as tough as they are for families right now.
I love your name, Debt Free Dad, because it kind of encompasses what you just shared, is that you know the struggles of parenting. That a debt free dad feels very relatable. You know what I mean? It's not like you're some wealth manager type person, and I
Right.
think that's so important because it feels intimidating, right? A lot of us feel like, oh, the only people that seem to have it together a lot of times online financially are living in these giant houses and they have all this money, and we feel like, how can what they say really help me? And so I appreciate that you kind of bring it down to maybe a more common level. There's no right or wrong or better or worse, but maybe a level that more people can relate to. I'm
Yeah.
curious, are you open to sharing how long it took you to get out of debt and what your debt was?
Yeah, so it took me about 4 or 5 years, and I say about because when I did this, I never had any intentions of sharing what I did, so I never really kept good track of any of it. But I paid off about 45 grand in about those 4 or 5 years, and I also went through that divorce in kind of the middle of that, so I had to take almost an entire year off my journey, because obviously when you're moving on, starting a life over and having to find different housing, and everything came to a screeching halt. So it definitely was not a linear path. It had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of peaks and valleys, and a lot of things that I had to overcome along the way. And when a lot of people, ask me, how did you do it? And I essentially just tell them, I just failed my way. You just fail, you learn, and you do better the next day. You fail, you learn, you do better the next day. And that's how I did it. There was nothing special about me and some secret that I followed. It was just doing the hard stuff that a lot of people tend to avoid, and just being willing to be committed to that on a consistent basis. And yeah, 4 or 5 years is what it took. But as far as that's like credit cards, a lot of credit cards, car payments were a big one. Had some student loans mixed in there as well, but it was a good mixture of a lot of different things. Personal loan for my grandma for 5 grand. So we had everything.
All the kinds of loans, all of that.
Oh yeah.
Well, I really appreciate, first of all, you sharing that, because I know that even though this is what you do for a living, it's still a vulnerable place to say, hey, listen, I ended up in a not so great spot financially. A lot of times it can feel like you said, it's a failure in a way that you're like, am I a responsible adult? Am I a good parent? All of these kind of shamey questions come into play. So I appreciate that vulnerability. And it's so important for people to separate their personal worth from what's going on in the bank account. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you do that. I love that your purpose or that your mission really is purpose driven. It's not just like, oh, you like to talk about money, which of course you have to enjoy that side of it, the numbers a little bit if you do what you do. But
Yeah.
I talk a lot about on the podcast about purpose, and that is the whole reason we want to declutter, is we then free up our time and our space to be able to pour into something that matters. And this matters. And I appreciate your work being so rooted in that love of helping other people. Well, let's kick it off kind of with this high level question, which is, What really are the biggest repercussions of living beyond our means?
Oh, there's so many, but at the top of the level right now, they recently did, this past year, they did a study on what causes the most stress in the United States for adults. And number one is money. It's money and personal finance. So I think, on the very top level, it's amazing to me in just a short period of time how much better you can feel about your financial situation once you have a good plan in place and you have a direction to follow. In fact, so many of the people that we have helped over the years within just a matter of the first 60 to 90 days of working their progress, they're like, Brad, I haven't really saved a ton yet. I haven't really paid off a lot of debt yet, but it's like, I wake up and I'm like excited. Like I see the hope now. I see, like you just mentioned, purpose. Like this is, I have goals now. I have things that I want to do, and I actually see a light at the end of the tunnel that I could actually, achieve those. So I think first and foremost, it's really at an emotional level is really why I am so adamant and what I'm so passionate about with teaching about this. It isn't so much that money is the most important thing, but it's when you have control over your money, it allows you to focus on the most important things in your life because it steals so much energy from us. Like for instance, there's statistics about, hours are spent at work worrying about your money and your personal finance, your bills. When's that next check coming in? When are those bills coming out? And that takes away from your work performance. There are people that we work with that all of a sudden are now getting promotions, they're getting raises, they're starting to make more money because when you take all that emotional energy and you're able to put it into something that's more productive, and serving to your life, it's amazing the ripple effect it'll have, like parenting and your relationships and everything. So I think that's, I mean, money aside, savings and building wealth and all of that kind of stuff, that throw all that stuff aside, I think first and foremost, it's just the overall level up and quality of life that you get once you have a good plan that you're following and you're starting to make progress, the confidence that you get. It's incredible. I just had 2 members celebrate here today that they are 100% now focusing on their health. They're able to eat better. They're able to now afford to go to gyms. They're now able to focus on different things because they're like, I, I never expected that would be one of the benefits of doing this, but it's amazing all the other things now and I now get to get because I've paid off all my credit cards or I've built up a savings or I actually have a plan for my money now.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing, and I love that I'm hearing this, is that it's not a matter of chasing more and more money. Like you said, throw all that out the window to an extent. It's a matter of being able to live comfortably enough that that is not taking up your brain space. And
Right.
I think money becomes a kind of tricky subject because we say, well, how much is it really that important to focus on making more money? Will it make us happier? I'm actually listening to The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin right now, and she has a whole chapter about money that I just listened to. And it was interesting to hear her research about how, obviously to an extent, when it comes to meeting our basic needs, money does make us happier, right? Like
Right.
as a human, we have certain things we need to do, like a roof over our heads and food in our bellies, right? And of course, once you reach a certain level of money, then chasing more and more doesn't make you happier.
Right.
But what I'm hearing from you is that it's not a matter of your clients being like, oh, well, a bigger house or fancier vacations are going to make me happier. It's not. It's the day to day being able to pour into what they love without the stress of the basic necessities taking up their brain space. And that's really decluttering too. I mean, this is really such a perfect conversation. They're
Yeah.
so in tandem, really, these two concepts, which we'll get to more about the decluttering piece in a little bit. But a lot of people were never taught how to manage their finances. And I know that's a lot of what you do. But what's the number one thing you would advise someone to do as they kick off their journey to become debt free or just live a more financially responsible life?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like a process that you probably would be familiar with decluttering is like how do we declutter your finances so you get things organized and figure out what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. The average millennial right now, over 50% of millennials have no idea what's going on in their bank account right now. Over 50% of a generation, they have no idea what's going in and what's going out. So I think for a lot of people, when they're first getting started, what I suggest is print out all of your bank statements, your credit card statements, anywhere you're spending money, PayPal, Cash App, I mean, anywhere. Print out all these statements, or if you want to do it digitally, that's fine too. But print out all these statements, get out your highlighters, and start going through the last 3 to 6 months. If you want to be an overachiever, maybe do the last 12 months, the last year, and really with a fine tooth comb, look at where your money's been going. And for the overall majority of people, Shannon, who do this, they come back and they are absolutely blown away because they begin to see like, I can't, here I have been thinking like, I don't have any money to save. I don't have any money to pay down debt. Here I've been thinking like, there's no hope for me, but literally it's just been a huge mismanagement of my money. And, it's so easy in day-to-day life. We get so busy, especially as parents, you go through it. It's so easy just to have all of these dollars leak out of your bucket. And you begin to just lose sight of how much money is actually going out and where it's going. And is it truly bringing value to the life that you want to live? So I think the first step is really getting a really good understanding about where your money is going, and then deciding about, okay, what are you going to keep? What are you going to get rid of? And what are you going to shop around?
Yeah, making those intentional choices. Step one is that I think a lot of people they might listen to the podcast or they'll follow certain people online and they just hope things start to magically happen. But you gotta sit down with your Excel sheet. You gotta say, I'm gonna turn off the TV tonight and look at my finances instead. I would say that's like the hardest thing to do, right?
Huge.
My husband and I, we try and do that once a year, and it can feel like, okay, we gotta get this on the calendar, because it's not that hard. But for whatever reason, putting down distractions and actually focusing on something that's going to have a huge benefit in our lives feels really hard to do. So I love that you're like, just sit down, like print it out, look at what you're doing.
I don't want to do it either. A lot of people are like, Brad, you must just have this, you just love finance. I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to do my budget. I am the same exact way. I don't want to do it just as much as the next person. But over the years, I've learned, like, by just doing it and just be willing to put in that uncomfortable activity, it's such a huge payoff.
Well, and it becomes easier with time, right? Like the first time you set up an Excel spreadsheet or whatever you want to use, we go old school, just use a spreadsheet. But you know what? When you put it all in there, it's like, it's a little tough. And then when you go over it again in 6 months, you just are looking at the columns you already made and you're more comfortable with the idea. You're excited to see how well you did, and it becomes more exciting rather than daunting. And I would say that's literally, again, the same thing for decluttering. I tell people all the time, like, you actually have to move your hands and move things around and put them in a bag. You can't just like hope that you end up with less because you bought a decluttering guide on Instagram, which, I mean, I have one. It's great. I want to guide you, but you have to do the work yourself,
Right.
And with all your experience and all these different members in your membership, what are some of the biggest regrets you see people when they do take a look at their finances and they're like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing?
Yeah, I would say right now, I mean, across the board, after the last 9 years that I've been doing this, going out to eat, biggest one of them all. And I've seen anywhere from, obviously depending on each individual's life, but, several hundreds of dollars, and even having members find thousands of dollars a month that they are spending on eating out, depending on their incomes. So that's a big one. Obviously, subscriptions are huge right now. I mean, it's so easy to sign up for these really inexpensive apps, $1.99 here, $2.99 there, $9.99 there. And, it's like, those are such small purchases that we just tend to forget about them and not pay attention to them. But that's the risk of death by 1,000 cuts, right? Because it's like all these little things that are adding up to this giant number, month after month. So if you're not paying attention to those things, and then, you get to some of the obvious ones that people don't necessarily want to admit or don't want to get rid of. And the next one is car payments are huge. The average car payment right now is over $700 a month. And for most people, with an average income and living paycheck to paycheck, that is just a cash flow killer in most cases. Also, car payments are one of the number one reasons why people aren't getting approved for mortgages today. So here we are, we're putting money into a car, which I know we all need, but we're putting money into a vehicle that goes down in value, and that's keeping us from investing into something like a home that's going to go up in value. So if you look at the ideas and the habits of people who are living paycheck to paycheck and maybe living like a broke lifestyle, if you're consistently investing into a vehicle and it's taking up a good chunk of your money and you're wondering why you're always broke, it could be parked in your driveway. And that's almost always, I shouldn't say every time, but almost always one of the culprits of a lot of financial stress on people's monthly cash flow.
Yeah. So I actually did a poll on my Instagram last week, and I said, what are some purchases that you regret? Because it was Amazon Prime Day week. It extends. It's ridiculous. And so just to kind of help people in their feeds have a little something different other than buy this, it was like, what do you regret buying? Let's slow down, right? Number one answer, 1,000% was a new car or my car payment,
Wow.
And my husband and I haven't had a car payment. We feel super fortunate for that. My husband was able to sell a car before we got married. He lived a totally different lifestyle. So he had this like fancy sports car, which we sold and used that money to get our family vehicle. And then I had my car payment that I paid off in, it was 7 years, and I got it in 2013, but it was used then. We paid it off a couple years after we got married, and that was a lower car payment too. I think it was only like 300 something bucks. It was not like a super nice car, and it was used. And he still drives that to this day. I think it's a 13-year-old car. We have no car payment on. It's great on gas. It gets him to and from work. And he's a commander in the Coast Guard. He's, one of the top dogs where he works, and he rolls up in this 2012 Ford Fusion every morning. You know what I mean?
I love it.
And it's great because it gives us so much more financial freedom to do things. And it's not worth having a fancy car payment. And it's not to say that we can't enjoy certain things. And some people might be car people, which actually my husband is a car person, for the record. The car we sold for the family, God bless his heart, was his like 19 something 70, I don't know, Ferrari.
Oh,
it was
wow.
like this. I know. Wow. I was like, honey, we need a car that can put car seats in. Thank you. Actually, you want to hear something funny? When we got married, he had 3 vehicles, none of which had any practicality. He had a motorcycle, Ferrari, and that, by the way, wasn't even, he had it in storage at this point in life. It was like not even in use. And then a 1995 pickup truck. It's a special one. If anyone knows anything about cars, I know nothing, or else I would know the year. He's probably going to kill me for not knowing. But it had no AC. It barely ran. I mean, most of the time in the morning, it didn't run. Like, so he'd drive his motorcycle to work 45 minutes. And anyway, I laughed. We got married. I'm like, you have 3 cars and none of them make any sense at all. But anyway, it worked out because we were able to kind of use that so we don't have a car payment now with our 2 very practical cars. Well, actually 3. We do have a camper van. That's a whole nother story. But anywho, the point is that makes a lot of sense to me, that car payments are a tough one. And it's such a big chunk, like you said. And the eating, I talk about that all the time. We are still, I mean, I am a mom that might as well have lived in the 80s. I'm like, we don't buy fast food. We're going to pack sandwiches for our road trip kids. Like, this is the way that we live, and it saves us so much money.
It does. It does.
It really does. So a lot of this is talking about, I always say that decluttering, or living in a decluttered home, living a decluttered life, is kind of like a 2-part lifestyle. So the first is about getting stuff out, right? That's the decluttering piece. And the second is, which is more important in the long run, is what we're talking about here, which is that letting stuff in, because you're never going to live a decluttered lifestyle if it's a revolving door of stuff, right? Like, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let's talk about this piece of what we let in a little bit more before we dive into getting stuff out. What are some of the biggest traps you see people fall into when it comes to buying things that they don't need? Why do people do this? Why do they have the car? Why do they buy all the knickknacks for their house that add up, or all the subscriptions, all of these things that add up?
Yeah, I think a big part of it kind of comes down to what you said originally in our conversation, Shannon, is the purpose side of things. I think a lot of us struggle with what we truly want in life. And I think sometimes we get overcome by what everybody else is doing, what marketing and advertising is telling us to do, what these retailers are telling us that we should have. And then we tend to think like, well, that's what we should have. And the reality is I think that's where a lot of us really struggle, including myself. I think they say upwards of all 50% of grocery purchases are all made on impulse. 40 to 80% of all purchases overall are made on impulse. They say on average, the average person will spend $300,000 in their lifetime on just impulse and emotional purchasing alone. These are all statistics from like Shopify, because they put out articles to obviously get their retailers to say, hey, buyers are willing to buy. This is how you take advantage of their emotions, right? This is how you get people to buy. So we got to understand that as consumers, that they are really using a lot of that against us. And I think when it comes to like education in schools, not only we got to teach people about money, but we also got to teach people how to properly defend themselves against today's marketing, because today's marketing is so sophisticated. It fascinates me that they can get people to spend money that they didn't plan on spending. Like, you can be on your phone and within 10 minutes, you're buying something that you didn't even plan on buying that day, or you're going into debt for something that you don't have money for and you're buying that day, because the marketing is just that good. So this is something that you really have to work on as a human, as a consumer, and it's really reshaping and rewiring your brain, improving your financial mindset. And I think it all kinds of comes down to that purpose. What is it that I want in my life? What is it that I need in my life? And you begin to build this filter that you can put your purchases through. Does this fit within the life that I want to live? If it doesn't, it's an easy no. But it takes time to develop that, that backbone to say, no, I don't need this. And so for me, like when I look at purchases, I love time freedom. Like I want to be able to, spend my time how I want with my kids. Like if I just want to get up one day and go hang out with them, or if I want to get up one day and go do an activity with family, friends, whatever, I want to be able to do that. But the thing I realized over the years is the more stuff I had, the less time I actually had to do those things. So for me, when I look at things, I ask myself, especially if it's a larger purchase, it's like, is this going to take up more of my time, or is it going to give me more of my time back? And that's my buying filter, because I don't want my life weighed down by a bunch of stuff and a bunch of bills that are going to cause me to have to work that much harder just to keep all of those things. And, if you look at, the regrets of, people who are passing away or about to die, and they talk about, the 5 regrets of the dying, Bonnie Ware wrote that blog post many, many years ago, and none of them ever say, I regret not having a bunch of stuff. It's usually, I regret not spending time on the things that I wanted to spend time on being with the people that I wanted to be with, or just letting myself be happier. So those are the things that I tend to focus on more when I'm looking at purchases, when I'm looking at bringing things into my life. How does that fit into the scope of the purpose that I'm living? And is it, again, going to push me closer to that, or is it going to move me further away? And that's the filter I kind of follow.
I love the word filter because that is such a good visual of, and it makes you slow down, right? That's what a filter does. It kind of slows things down. So it catches the things that don't matter and that aren't important, or that we don't want in our lives, right? We don't want the whatever it is that goes through the Brita, it catches that,
Right.
And it's huge. It's so important to have a filter like that. I love that you say that, because actually I'm doing a keynote at a women's symposium in a couple weeks. So I've been focusing on putting my slides together, and one of them is literally that question: is, does this item bring me closer to or further from my core values? And learning to identify those core values. And that's some serious internal work, because like you said, the world is going to tell you what your values should be, and it's going to be consumerism, right? Like we live in a buy, make buy. I do this. I've done this on other episodes before, where I say buy, and then I think of NSYNC. But anyways, like other buy. But anyway, the world will kind of shove these values down on you, and before you know it, it infiltrates your system, and you think that they're your own values. You think, well, in order to be a good mom, I need to live in a house where all my kids have their own rooms, and I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z and spend this kind of money, and I put them in this kind of sports and do this kind of thing, because that's the values that the world is telling you in this fast-paced consumerist lifestyle. And it takes a lot of effort to slow down and say, what are my core values? What matters to me? And are the things that I am spending my money on bringing me closer to those values or further away? That's huge. So what are some practical things people can do then to combat this consumerism?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, number one, is just being aware of it. I think the more you become aware of what they're doing, how they're using those things against you, I think is step number one. Is just have an awareness of the advertising, the language that they're using to get you to want to buy and consume these things, right? The other thing I think is going to be super helpful too is allow yourself time to consider your purchases. So if you are someone who is consistently overcome by emotion and impulse, you see something you want to buy, whether it's online or you're in the store, and you have a hard time telling yourself no. Don't tell yourself no. Just say instead, I'm going to wait 24 hours. I'm going to wait 24 hours. I'm just going to give myself 24 hours. And by giving yourself time and stepping away allows a lot of that emotion, that impulse, that feeling that I need to have that thing because it's going to do whatever I think it's going to do for me. All of that goes away over those 24 hours. And I would guarantee that about 95, maybe even 99% of the time, you will likely not go back and buy that item or make that purchase just by giving your purchases more time. But again, they want you. That's why they use a lot of that language against you in the marketing and the sales. And it's do it now. It's not going to be here tomorrow. I guarantee you it will be there tomorrow. And if the sale isn't there, it'll be there again in the future if you really want it. So I think, having delayed gratification, practicing patience, and really just letting those, accepting the fact that you're having this emotional urge to do something, recognize it, feel it, but then also allow yourself to step away and let it go, and then really make a good decision on whether or not that purchase is something you really need to have.
Absolutely. It happens to us constantly. I would say it's mostly on social media for most of us is we see these ads because the algorithm is so good. I
Oh,
mean, you could just think about something. You cannot even say it out loud and suddenly appears and you're like, you're in my brain. What's happening? It's so scary. It's so weird. So I am going on, my family is taking us on, the whole family on, my parents are taking us on a Disney cruise next month, which is
wow.
so exciting. I know it's such a privilege and it's such a blessing. And so I don't have it's a long story. My closet is it's in rough shape in terms of what I can actually wear because after having kids and as a woman you fluctuate, you go up and down, right? And
Right.
it's just hard. And so I was like, I don't think I have 7 days worth of clothes that I can wear on a cruise, and you don't have laundry on a cruise. At home, it's fine. I live a very minimal lifestyle. I do my laundry every other day. I wear the same things over and over again. But I was like, I'm going to get real stinky on that cruise. And so I was like, all right, I live in Florida. It's always hot. I'm going to get a tennis dress, it's like a workout dress to kind of supplement the cruise, but then I can wear it in my lifestyle. And I've been really focused on if I'm going to make a new purchase, I want it to be an ethical purchase. I want this to be an ethically made item. And so I had a guest on a couple episodes ago, and she was talking about slowing down and making ethical choices because it's a lot easier to hop on Amazon, type in tennis dress and buy one, right?
Yeah.
Or walk into Target. But it's harder to find these companies that make clothes with, fair wages and with not synthetics and all of the things that are important to me. So I spent way too long. Yesterday, I told Aaron, my husband, I was like, I don't know if that was even really worth it given the amount of time I spent, but I spent like an hour online trying to find a tennis dress, and I found one, and I'm like, I think it's good enough because every single time I look up a company, someone online tells me it's not ethical enough, right? That's like
right.
It drives you crazy. And you're like,
Sure.
I can't find the perfect dress. But anyways, long story long is that I ended up buying this one tennis dress, and I'm really excited about it. And first of all, slowing down is harder. There is a little bit. You have to really want that item, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. I thought through what the length was going to be of the tennis dress. I thought through what the straps were going to look like, all of the things, because I'm only getting one and I'm spending a little more money on it because it's ethically made. So you better believe I am thinking a lot harder about that purchase than I would if I'd go on Amazon and be like, whatever, if I don't like it, I'll return it for free, or maybe I'll just use it a couple times or whatever, right? So slowing down our purchases, it's going to give us a higher quality stuff. And in general, it's going to save us money because I'm not buying 3 of them on Amazon. I'm going to buy the one that works for me and that's going to last for a long time and is really, really good. But the point of the story is actually that then an hour later, I get on my phone and every single advertisement on social media for me is a tennis dress.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't know there were so many in this world and so many companies that made them. And all of them were ethical companies that, or at least, I don't know if it's greenwashing or what, but like they were all like ethically based companies. And I was laughing. I was like, this is insane. It's just insane because then of course I'm tempted. I'm like, oh, look, this one comes in blue, right? And then you're like, what am I doing? It's really hard. And so I always encourage people as a practical idea as well is like, your social media is going to be full of people selling you things that you're going to actually want. So you have to then follow accounts like Debt Free Dad, or like me, I'm paring down, or there's a bajillion, Joshua Becker, Balancing Beams. I can name 1,000 of them that are the opposite messaging to remind you when you're scrolling, hey, you don't need that stuff. You want to live in a decluttered home. You want to save your money. You have to have that counter messaging. Otherwise, you're not going to survive it. You're going to buy the tennis dress in 3 different colors.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a daily commitment. It is. It is a daily commitment. It's something you have to wake up every day because it is so easy. Even me. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for years, and like you said, you can still get overcome of it because you're still human at the end of the day. So it is that intention of just I'm going to be very intentional with the way that I handle my money today.
Totally. Okay, so the other big piece, of course, is decluttering what we've already let in. You're like, all right, well, I've already bought all this stuff. Now what? So when we think about decluttering, most of the time, especially those of us who are decluttering educators, we're like, don't worry so much about the money aspect of it. We talk through the guilty feelings and all of that, but a lot of it is like, hey, this is leading you to make different choices moving forward, right? Like all the things we just talked about, not letting more in. The decluttering process is really great for that because you are face to face with all of the money that you have spent in the past. And it's not a matter of saying, I get bogged down by guilt. So I don't like that idea of guilt, but it's more just motivation not to make those choices again in the future.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how would you say that the act of getting stuff out actually can help us financially as well? Not just in what we're letting in, but in the way we get it out.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, right now, 63% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency expense without going into debt. That's 63%. And that number has not changed. That was the same number back in 2017. So we aren't very good savers here in the United States. So I think once you look at your finances, you're going through your expenses. I think for most people, building up, at least even just a beginner or starter savings fund of $1,000 to $3,000 is a good goal to have. And so I think if you're someone who wants to get out of debt, you want to clean up your finances. I think these things all go hand in hand with each other. In fact, Shannon, this is probably something that a lot of our members do, especially very much on the beginning, is they start to declutter their house as a way or a method to start building up that first emergency fund that's going to help them and prevent them from going further into debt for, the emergencies that are going to come. So that's the motivator for me. And it's like, look, if you're looking for things to make income, to make extra income, decluttering and going through your house is one of the best ways to do that. Obviously, it gets to the point where our members sell so much stuff that they have nothing left to sell sometimes. And then they have to look for other means of making income. It could be side hustles or starting a hobby or getting a second job or things like that. But I think first and foremost, I think looking around your house is one of the best ways to kind of get the ball rolling and building up these first initial savings that are going to help you eventually pay down debt and stay away from debt in the future for covering a lot of your emergencies.
Yeah. And the more you declutter, the more I feel like you can make when it comes to selling. So I always encourage people not to get too caught up in selling, because we often think that what we own is worth a lot more than it is.
And it ain't.
So that can be a trap, is that people then hold on to the clutter because it doesn't sell on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. So, I think there are limits when it comes to that. Is, all right, if it doesn't sell in a week, I'm going to lower it significantly, and some money is better than no money, than it's just sitting in my closet not making me any money at all, right? Yeah. So I think there is something to be said for that. But it is interesting, the more we've decluttered. So our house it's pretty decluttered at this point, to the point that we are now getting rid of furniture, because I'm like, I don't need a dresser in the guest room because there's nothing inside of it, and our guests would like more space for their suitcase, not a dresser. So you get these bigger ticket items like furniture that you can start selling when you've taken all of the knickknacks and got rid of those, right? You can start selling the things that actually make you a little bit of money that way. And so I think people think, oh, I'm going to make money on the little stuff. You're not going to make money on the little stuff as much. You can make some, and that's exciting. But it is kind of those bigger ticket items that you can uncover those items when you get all the clutter that's on top of them off of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's great about the whole process of not only decluttering, but also getting your finances in order at the same time. Is just, now you are living in a very clean living space. Your finances are now begin, or you got organization, you got a budget, you know exactly what your expenses are, what your income is. You're being more intentional with the way that you're spending money. I mean, I can just feel, and I don't even have this anymore, but I can go back to the day when I felt that way, just all the stress starting to melt off just by some of the stuff that we're kind of discussing here today, because it is so relieving, just from a physical standpoint of where you live, and then just a financial standpoint, and getting all of those things organized all at once. It is just an amazing feeling.
Yeah. The more you feel in control of one area of your life, the more you're going to feel control in other areas of your life. And then as a whole, you begin to feel more fulfilled because you have a sense of agency. So if you declutter your home, and I always joke that people want to be in control, and a lot of times that they can do that in unhealthy ways. There are worse things than being a control freak about decluttering your house. You know what I mean? It feels really good to get stuff out, and you can kind of become addicted to it. And I'm like, listen, if you're going to become addicted to something, I'm not opposed to the decluttering part, because like you said, when you walk into a room and you're like, oh my gosh, look at this beautiful guest room that I don't throw stuff into just because the door's closed most of the year, but it's like this space you can breathe in. Then you're like, what else can I accomplish? Oh my gosh, well, I can definitely stick to my savings goals. And you start to trust yourself more. You start to believe in your ability to have control over your life. And people think, oh, like, living by a strict budget or getting rid of stuff in your house some people might see it as control in a bad way. It's lessening your freedom, right? It's kind of putting you in this cage, and it's the opposite. It gives you the freedom because you know that you can do it. You can make these choices, and you have the agency to decide. You don't have all the consumerist companies deciding for you. You don't have all of the guilt deciding for you to keep the stuff in the house. All of this, you just feel free, and you're like, I can do anything.
It is such an amazing feeling. Yeah, for me, I mean, I just went through this whole phase within the last 18 months. I lost my spouse, and she passed away, and I had to go through this whole decluttering thing. And that was a very healing part of moving on and moving forward for me. there was something about it. And we didn't have, in my opinion, a ton of stuff to begin with, but it was still amazing how much stuff, when you start to really go through things, how much you really truly have. And for me, as I began to declutter and get rid of things, because again, when you lose someone like that, you lose someone so important in your life, you begin to realize like none of this stuff matters. Like none of it really matters one little bit. So for me, it was a very healing part of grieving, was getting rid of things and getting rid of stuff, because I had no connection to it whatsoever. It was a very good life lesson to learn of what truly is important in life and how much time and effort we spend chasing after all this stuff that just buries us in our homes. And it was just it's a great feeling. Like I mentioned to you, it's like I'm in this empty office now because I'm redoing some things, and I've moved out of my home and moved into a different one. And it's just a great feeling to start over, and you don't have all of that stuff hanging out anymore.
Yeah. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. That
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate
it's
that.
so hard. I lost my mom, and like you said, I went through the decluttering process of her stuff, and my stepdad was a big part of that as well. But there is a sense of peace, I would say, too, that I don't feel like she's stuck in her stuff, that I
Yeah.
need that stuff to have that her memory lives, that she was real. Like the stuff isn't what made her life impactful at
Right.
all. And
Right.
so while we do keep, of course, a couple of mementos, I have some of her t-shirts and, just a few things, but instead those are things that jog really happy memories. It doesn't feel like as a whole, I'm just have all her stuff in a storage unit and if I get rid
Right.
of it, then it's getting rid of my mom, right?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not it. That is not it.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing with that, because it does.
Yeah.
It goes really, really deep. This
It does.
freedom, it goes deep. It's freedom from some of these really hard emotions and the grief. It's freedom to do things we want to do with our lives and accomplish certain things, decluttering and making intentional choices, intentional living, which is what I talk about, which really is, like you said, hand in hand with money, goes so much deeper than what we see right in front of our faces. And another thing that I know you've mentioned to me before is the maintenance cost of holding onto things. So not only can you make money selling things, but how do you save money by getting rid of things?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look at like big ticket items and just bigger things that you own. Like for instance, I had a camper, and it was a seasonal camper. It stayed on its own site, but there are secondary costs to owning things, and those secondary costs can be the things that really weigh down on your finances. Like for instance, my camper was paid for 100%, but there was still a significant cost every year. I think we figured out it's about $7,000 a year to have a paid for camper and be able to camp in it, be able to travel to and from it, all the food, all the activities, all the things that we were going to need to camp for the year.
Insurance.
Insurance. It's like all of those things that you tend to forget about that eventually begin to add up. So by doing away with some of those things, again, when you look at your purpose and the life that you're living, do these things fit into that filter? By doing away with some of those items, especially those bigger ticker items, there's a huge amount of savings there that can happen, that because you're recouping a lot of those secondary costs that you tend to forget about when making some of those purchases.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mentioned we have a camper van. It's very small. You can park it in a parking space, and it's our little adventure van, and we love it. But it's funny when people are like, oh, that saves you money on hotels because you guys go on a lot of road trips and this or that. And I was like, listen, it doesn't save us anything. Our insurance payment is the same as if we stayed at 2 hotels a month.
Right.
That's not it. That's not why we have the van, but we know that it's an intentional choice,
Yeah,
right? Like
right.
that's part of we want to invest in the memories of the van, but we don't think it saves us money. We know that.
Right.
I think about the maintenance of the stuff we own too, that I think about like even house cleaners. The more clutter we have, if you have the money to spend on a service like that, the more likely you are to need one, especially more often because you have more crud for everyone that needs to be cleaned, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you live in a decluttered house, it's just so much easier to clean. You don't need the help as much, right? Or
Right.
There's just so much maintenance that goes into everything that we own. If you own more tech gadgets, what are you trying to fix? And the money, and the time that you're trying to fix certain things. All of that is money and time, and our stuff. No thing that we own is completely neutral. Everything takes time or money. All right. And my last thought and my last question here is, it's like kind of a silly little one, but it's also a really big one in my head. What are your thoughts on storage units? Do you see this a lot with your
Oh my
clients?
goodness. Yes. Yes, I do. In fact, I got a crazy statistic for you. At one
Okay.
time, and we when we re-recorded our program, Roots of Personal Finance, I share a statistic in there. This is back in 2019, and at the time, there were more storage units in the United States than there are McDonald's, Subway, and Star. Actually, I'm sorry, McDonald's and Starbucks combined. They had to put Subway on the list to actually beat out the storage units. That's
Oh
how
my
many
God.
storage units. There's more storage units than individual storage units than Starbucks and McDonald's combined, which is crazy. And they also did a statistic like I think it was every US citizen, I don't know if it was adults or if it was all US citizens, could literally stand under a storage unit in their own personal space without touching another person. That's how much storage we have in the United States. It's insane. It's insane. So, yes, my thought on storage units is number one. If you have a storage unit, and I get that they do come in handy for certain situations. If you're moving, need a temporary place to put your things for a month or two, depending on what's going on. I get that there is a specific need for some of these things, but for a lot of people, especially people that I work with, what I have found just with working with them is that this is excess stuff that they have stored, forgotten about, just aren't willing to deal with it. And now, not only are you mentioned maintenance, not only the maintenance cost now of just having the storage unit. I mean, the average storage unit, I mean, that I see for fees is anywhere between $70, sometimes upwards to $200 a month just to hold your things. So I think for me, it is a wake up call for a lot of people out there. If you have storage units and it's been there for a long period of time, it's like that could be an easy way to bring some money back into your life. Not only could you do away with the stuff that's in the storage unit, but can get the fees back that you're paying monthly for the storage.
Yeah. I forget what the statistic is exactly, but I had read that it's something like 70% of storage units are used for a year or longer. So we
Yeah.
think they're going to be temporary, but then we get used to not having that stuff in our house, and we a lot of times realize we don't really want it or we don't remember what it is anyway, and so we just keep it there, but then we don't want to get rid of it because it's worth something, right? That phrase, it's worth something. Well, if it's worth
Yeah.
something, is it worth, let's say you're spending $100 a month on it, by the end of the year, is what is in there, or can you really sell it for
Yeah.
$1,200? Because like we said, most of your stuff isn't
Right.
worth what you think it's worth. You keep it in there for 2 years, $2,400. You keep it in there for 4 years, you're looking at almost 5,000, or yeah, almost
Yeah.
$5,000. I promise most of the stuff in a storage unit you can't sell
Right.
for and get $5,000 back from it. So now not only have you wasted that initial cost of buying the things in there, but then yet again you're spending more and more and more maintaining it, thinking it's worth something, when in reality now its worth is kaput because you've spent so much you're never going to get back on storing those items. So I'm glad that you know all those fun and interesting stats, because I figured, I was like, that's a huge maintenance piece to
It's
me, is that
huge.
storage
Huge.
unit. So
Yep.
all right. Well, listen, at the end of every episode, I ask everyone the same two questions. So I'm going to ask you,
All right.
what is one thing that you are currently paring down?
Oh, my house, I sold my house and I moved into a different house. So that's been the biggest thing for me, is really just doing a lot of what we're talking about on today's podcast. And like I said, I felt like I still didn't have a lot of stuff, but even when you start going through it, it was amazing to me how much of it I started to look at. Am I really getting any use out of any of these things? And I found myself like in the garage, especially like I would organize the garage. I'm organizing the same things over and over again and never using them in between. So that to me was just a sign of like, I just need to do away with it, sell it, donate it, or just throw it away. But yeah, that would be the big thing for me right now.
As a military wife, I feel like part of my passion for decluttering has come because we move every 3 years, and it like forces you to really look at your stuff, and you're like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Why am I dragging this 4,000 miles from Alaska to Florida? Like, I don't even get it. Okay. And what is something that you are looking forward to right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. I guess all the work that we're doing, as I said, I lost a spouse here about 18 months ago. And, when you go through something like that, it really is a life-changing experience. And so for me right now, being able to move on and being able to, move forward and rebuild a new life, because again, we had control over our finances and getting back to my business, I'm super excited about it. Cause again, what we do here has been so helpful for so many people. And it truly is my passion to be able to serve and help people with their finances, normal everyday people. So for me, it's getting back to new normal, and I'm really excited about doing that and having conversations with people like you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all that you've shared today. Where can everyone find you, follow along, even learn more about your membership?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to head over to debtfreedad.com, you can get all of the stuff that we offer right there. Also, you can find the Debt Free Dad podcast. We have over 250 episodes. We do 2 new episodes every single week. And
Wow.
again, we do so much, like just bringing on guests, bringing on other people that have walked the walk and are now sharing what's helped them with their finances. Again, normal everyday people who are doing this. So if you want to save more money, get out of debt and financial stress, the podcast is a great place to start.
And guys, I'm going to be on a guest on it soon.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, you are. I'm excited.
I'm so glad we are going to do this little podcast swap. I'll make sure that all of that information is in the show notes. And Brad, I just can't thank you enough for coming on today. This was all just really practical, helpful information, and I know everyone's going to love it.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate it.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.